Hello, everyone, and welcome. And like we just said, from Singapore to Seattle, or Seattle to Singapore, depending on which way you want to go around the world. And always just such a brilliant, marvelous pleasure to welcome Deborah to the SAPICS stage. I wish it were to the real stage. Hopefully, not hopefully, we will be in Cape Town from the 12th to the 15th of June, but Deborah won't be able to be with us. So she very kindly agreed to do a members only webinar for us. And she's here in her personal capacity, but as the founder of the Circular Supply Chain Network, which is, she'll be the first person to say it's for geeks who are interested in circular supply chains and inventory, because in Deborah's world, inventory is everything. So I first met Deborah through the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation when we were working on a project there, and she made me realize that supply chain management can save lives. And as I always say, she's now made me realize that hopefully supply chain management and efficient and effective and ethical supply chain management can help us save the world. So I'm not going to go on because she's the star of the show. What I will be doing is posting in the chat the title of Deborah's book, which I really, really recommend. Even I've read it. And it's a great read. It's an easy read, but it's also a really factual read. And you come away understanding so much more. And I'm convinced that by the end of this one, ESG and DEI will not just be more acronyms that we have to learn. We're going to know exactly what we need to be doing to ensure that we're not greenwashing and that we're doing stuff properly. So over to you, Deborah, and thank you again very much for getting up early and just for doing this for us.
Thank you so much for having me. Always a joy to come and speak with SAPICS, one of my favorite organizations. Let me share my screen here. And if you don't see a lovely landscape, please wave at me. And just setting up my little control panel so I can see as many faces as I can. What's amazing is the Circular Supply Chain Network, I actually launched at SAPICS a couple of years ago as a bit of an experiment. What could happen if I put this organization out into the world? Now we're almost 5,000 followers on LinkedIn, and we've got a fairly active volunteer base. And so it's been a great experiment to see how we've progressed along the way. The picture you see up on the presentation is a city in the upper left corner of the United States. It's called Wenatchee, Washington. It's recently made the news. It actually looks a little bit like parts of South Africa, actually, with the valley, but that's another presentation. There's also wine here, similar, but that again, another presentation. So where is Wenatchee? It is located up here in this corner. Why am I showing you this heat map? So as I said, Wenatchee recently made the news, and I was very surprised to see this because it's a fairly conservative community, but it's making the news. Young women are out earning young men in a couple of parts in America, and Wenatchee tops the list, where women, younger women, so between 16 and 29, are actually out earning men making 120% of what they earn. And this is starting to become a trend among younger folks across the country. So this is interesting for me because this is also where I grew up. So of course it gets me thinking, maybe I need to become younger and move back home. I don't know how I would do that first part, but I've tried to figure out how it might work. I think a lot about these topics lately. So in the time together we have today, let's explore a few topics around ESG, which is environmental, social, and governance. First, we'll explore 4 ways to encourage more women to be part of our team. So that's the social and governance part of ESG. And then we'll look at 2 real problems to solve to take a step closer for the environmental part of ESG. And throughout, brace yourselves, we're going to have a bit of a pop quiz about the news, about ESG news and supply chain. Don't worry, you can play it honestly. It's going to be painless. There's going to be no public shaming. But during the next hour, you're going to be participating. So have your phone or an internet browser nearby. It's going to be, again, super painless. It's going to be fun. Some of the questions I ask you will just be your thoughts about how your team is, and then some will be a quiz, and I will label it so you have no fear. You'll be very clear on which ones are your opinions and which ones are quizzes. It's going to work like this. Oops, not like that, like this. So if you pull your phone out or go to an internet browser and go to menti.com, I'll do this with you. And once you get to menti.com, you'll enter this code at the top of the screen that you can see, 29720208. And if you've done all that properly, you'll get a chance to put whatever name in that you'd like. This is the anonymous part, so no one will know. And you can join. So 4 of us have figured out how to do this. Fantastic. Again, it's going to be super fun, I promise. And gives us a chance to interact with each other a little bit. Although we may also just have a bit of a discussion at the end because we have the joy of being a reasonable size of team today. I'm going to give this 10 more seconds for you to go to menti.com. Enter the number you see at the top of that screen and join us for what I promise will be an entertaining round of feedback. All right, you can join us at any time. Oh, there's number 7. Thank you very much. Never too late to join, so you can always do that. Leaderboard a little early there. Let's see if oh, hold on. I know what I did. I didn't push enter. Here we go. All right, from the news. What percentage of US executives admit that their companies are guilty of greenwashing? 43%, 57%, 68%. I promise not all of our questions will be about the US today, but this is quite a recent one from this last week, so I figured we'll throw it in here. And the right answer is 68%. Gosh, that's a lot. That's a lot of people greenwashing, so that's not great. And as Jenny mentioned, we'll use today to see how we can greenwash less and take a few steps in the right direction. So we've got 2 people who got that right. Well done. You're at the top of the leaderboard. We'll do one more quiz, a couple of inputs, and we'll get cracking with the rest of the presentation. So here comes, which company has made headlines lately about workers unionizing? A unionizing world. Is it Starbucks? Is it Apple? Is it Amazon? Again, these are US-based companies, but they are making global news as unionization is starting to tick up across American markets. This is a bit of a trick question. All of them are actually right. Amazon has made big news, and then Starbucks recently has been making a bunch of news. Apple is making a little bit less noise, but they all are finding the same, that educated young people are starting to form unions and lead work to unionize for increased workers' rights, health, and safety. Very interesting. Where does that leave our leaderboard for this round? Excellent. See, the nice thing about this question is that you can not get it wrong, so that everybody gets points on this one. Perfect. So we'll come back to the quiz. These the next couple of questions are not, there's no right or wrong. This is asking you how your team works. So for the first one, you're going to get a scrolly button for each of these. Do you know the pay wage gap? This is between genders. The pay wage gap for your country, for your city, and for your company. So the pay wage gap is for every $1 that a man earns, how much does a woman earn? Or in the case of Wenatchee, Washington, my hometown, of course, women are actually making more. Astonishing, phenomenal. I asked my siblings if they had any idea what might be causing this phenomenon. We're wondering if men are just not working. Ooh, bit of a joke about my hometown there. All right, so not a huge pay wage gap awareness, which is totally normal. This is not a normal fact we carry around with us during the day, understanding what the pay wage gap is. Company-wise and country-wise, actually doing a bit better than city. One more question for you, and then we'll crack into the first action we can all take together. In my immediate team, that's however you'd like to define it, do women account for about a third to a half, or more than half of your immediate team? We've got some neck and neck competition here going for team size, pretty evenly spread actually. All right, we're going to crack on now about women in our teams. Oh wait, I had one more question for you that actually completely is relevant for the next one. So I've miscounted. One final question. This is a little also a bit of a gimme. Do you plan to grow your business this year? And maybe you don't. Maybe you're planning to become more efficient. But if you're planning to grow your business, your team, it's a little bit of a gimme question because normally the answer here is yes, but it's an important one. So thank you for answering that one. As business growth is often on many of our minds. And sometimes when we think about doing the right thing, it can feel like a negative investment for us. It's something that we're investing in, as in we're going to do something that's going to lose us money, but it's the right thing to do. In this case, however, we have study after study that shows more women in business means the business will perform better. This has been the case for financial performance for a really long time. We've got lots of studies that show put women in charge of leadership, put women on your boards. In this case, we're also finding, so here's my board item, which I think is very interesting, and it's not a huge number we actually need, and I'll talk about that a little bit. But what's really interesting is that this is also working for performance indicators past financial. So financial performance, we know companies will do better as you have more diversity of thought in your leadership teams. What a recent study has shown, however, is that it's also good for the planet, which is quite interesting. So this idea of however we want to define performance, it seems that including more women is going to help us there. So because we all want to have business growth this year, we know that having more women in our teams is really important, but sometimes we're finding it's hard to find women to hire and women to promote and have them retain in our teams. So let's go through 4 steps of actions we can all take to increase the number of women in our team and get more financial results and better performance. So the first step, hiring women into our teams. So we put out a job posting and we get lots of people who send in applications, and probably most are men. And they often aren't fully qualified for the job that they apply for. If a man is 60% qualified for a job, he'll apply. So if there's 10 bullet points of something he needs, if he hits 6, he'll think, great, I'll send in my application and see what happens. For a woman, it is a 100% match. If she doesn't feel qualified for every single qualification asked for in the job description, she will not apply. Just statistically. It doesn't always happen like this, but statistically, that's a tough word this morning. Quite a famous study from Harvard Business Review about if and why women apply for roles. And the important ones to call out here are this one, I didn't think they would hire me since I didn't meet the qualifications, and I didn't want to put myself out there if I was likely to fail. And this one, I was following the guidelines about who should apply. So here, when we have the time, we have a time here where candidates that the female candidates are as qualified as their male peers, but they're not applying because of these reasons. They're finding I'm not qualified, so I shouldn't apply. So if our funnel isn't even standing a chance, whoever's coming into the top of our funnel, we're not getting enough women to apply for roles, we're not seeing a 50-50 application, then we're sort of stuck from the beginning. So what are we going to do here? Some organizations, this is National Geographic, are starting to add language to their job descriptions that essentially says, please apply even if you don't have 100% match. And this feels very much like it's speaking directly to women. And it says, we're not looking for a tick list, we're looking for a great person to add to our team to make a stronger, more inclusive organization. So in this way, we can help get one step closer to women to apply. Another is to consider, of course, our own networks. We're finding, and you've probably heard the stat before, that the majority of jobs are filled through people that we already know. And so if you know women in your network who could be a good fit for a role that you know about, encourage her to apply and specifically say, it's okay that you're not a perfect fit. It's okay that you're not a perfect match, and apply. Sometimes though, we look into our network and we of course still hire men. And this is a view of the supply chain workforce. It shows gender splits as we go up in seniority. So we think about delivery drivers, warehouse workers, factory workers, analysts, managers, directors, and vice presidents. Very interesting to me actually is that factory is the closest to 50-50 between genders. But as we get up to the vice president level, we're really seeing 1 in 10 are women. Quite interesting, I think, for us to think about, and this is a 74,000 end value for how we're looking across the splits here. So that's one item we could do. We could change the way we talk about our jobs. We could change the way that we're recruiting women. Back to Menti now for just a moment. I've got a couple more quiz questions for you and then a couple more inputs as we go into our next section around the next action we can take. So here we go. This is a quiz again, and if you're just joining us, you can join us at menti.com. You can do that through a browser or through your phone. This is about something recently happening in the news, ESG and supply chain related. Which company recently announced the return of refillable glass bottles? P&G, Coca-Cola, or Heineken? Interestingly, the catalyst for this was actually not the environment. It was actually cost of inflation. And that was causing Coca-Cola to start to look at the way they used to do things and have refillable glass bottles that they wash and use again. Don't really care why we're doing it, but we're getting to the right place. So that's one kind of a cool step forward. Great work for several of you to get that right. And it has impacted our leaderboard. Good work, Zanola, for taking the lead here. One more quiz question and then a couple of inputs from you. Hapag-Lloyd, a shipping company, announced a competitive strategy around what capability? Selling carbon credits, autonomous vessels, or dry container tracking technology. Innovation in the shipping world doesn't often happen these days, but it's fun to see one that does. Let's see what has happened. Oh, I wrote this one really well. I gotcha. Dry container tracking technology. Pretty amazing, actually, to go and see what they're able to do with this. They're able to use it also to optimize for lower carbon by understanding more of where containers are going and sort of their life cycle as they go through the world. All right, 3 questions for you here while we go into the next section as we talk about bringing more women into our organization. So yes or no, I have hired somebody who wasn't 100% qualified for the role that I was hiring for. Most people are saying yes here, which again is just reiterating that how do we encourage women to apply even if it's not 100% match, which is a tendency, again, not always, but it's a tendency among women. The last job I got was through somebody I already knew. So the job you're right, currently, the job you're currently doing, did you get that through somebody you already knew, or did you apply cold on the website? Most of these are yeses. In my case, I've only gotten jobs through people I know, and I've never gotten a job that I applied for online. Never, not once. So this one hits home for me. And one last question, when I post a job, I look into my own network to recruit. So as you're posting a job, you're trying to recruit somebody into a role, you reach out to your network and you say, gosh, I'm really looking for somebody who has XYZ capabilities. And that looks like a consensus here. So again, the takeaway is as you're looking into your network, be clear that you're not looking for 100% match. There may be 3 of the 10 aspects of a job that really are critical, and the other ones are nice to have. And this way we can help to encourage more folks, more women to apply for the jobs that we're posting. All right, let's say you've managed to get women into your pipeline, 50-50 are applying. Now we need to, and we'll remember this slide from Wenatchee, but of course this is not the norm. Usually the pay gap looks more like this. The left side are a few international countries and the right side is the EU. What does this mean? It means that right smack dab in the middle, you see that red EU line. And for the EU, it says 13%. That means if I worked in an average EU country, I would make 87% of my male colleague. Said another way, if I was a man doing my job, I could stop working on October 15th, take the rest of the year off and make the same as my female self. And to me, I think, oh my God, I could have an entire quarter off and just hang out, chill, rebuild my batteries, and imagine what we could do with that. So as you think about this pay gap, sometimes it's nice to translate it into days because it kind of hits home more about what we could. First, we know that women don't tend to negotiate like at all. So 60% of women in this survey haven't negotiated their salaries ever in their entire career. They take what they're offered. They don't negotiate. They don't negotiate in the role that they're currently in. Second, so that's one thing to keep in mind as you consider what you're going to offer them. Second, we can list compensation in job descriptions. Some laws, this is Colorado State in America, are starting to require salary bands for positions. In this case, that's a huge band. However, it's listed. So there's steps going in the right direction so that you understand what's a normal band for this. Sometimes you also get through an interview process and find out they're really not going to pay you what you want to get paid, and it really, you just wasted your time doing 6 rounds of interviews. A strange relationship with transparency around salary bands, and this is starting to shift a little bit. So we can think about how it is we're going to offer the compensation package that we found a woman we want to hire, and you're going to give her an offer, but we want to make sure we're not going to play hardball, because chances are she's actually not going to push back on that. And so you're going to end up with pay disparity in your organization, and you'll have just made it worse. But once you make an offer and then she says yes, it's not like you're going to go back and say, actually, you know what, let me negotiate on your behalf. So we'll keep that in mind. Back to Menti here for a couple more questions as we go into the third of 4 actions we can take around women in the workplace. And we know that increasing the number of women will perform better, whether those targets are around financial performance or planet performance. 2 quiz questions for you here. And again, this ESG happenings in the news. Indonesia's scrambling. Indonesia banned, was it palm oil imports, palm oil exports, or palm oil processing? What have they banned recently? Palm oil exports, you are correct. Very interesting, the land of palm oil. That's, again, another presentation for another day, but an interesting one to watch as we start to imagine actions to take to reduce deforestation. And here's the next news quiz. A recent tech alliance aimed at reducing carbon has committed how much money? Is it $250 million, about $500 million, or nearly $1 billion? This is interesting. This is also very recent. Big names in tech are coming together to figure out what they can do to reduce. Yes, nearly $1 billion, $900 million that they're committing to taking actions together to reduce the carbon impact of technology. And we'll see how this does. Ooh, I think Candace just booted Zanola off the top of the leaderboard, but don't worry, you've got a chance to win it back. All right, 2 questions for you here. I have considered listing compensation on a job description. It's crossed your mind before as we try to figure out fits. Job titles are really very variable, and so even if somebody has the same job title somewhere and they come over, it's hard to know if that level will be similar for them. So this is if you've thought about it. Now we're going to ask you that do you actually list them on job description? So yes, it's required for my company. Yes, it's your preference. No, you don't. Or no, it's illegal. In some cases, there's a lot of sensitivity around job compensation. And in some cases, it's also illegal for employers to tell their employees that they cannot talk about their salary. This happened to me at a large company I worked for, operating many, many different countries. And they said, remember, try not, don't talk to each other about your compensation. It's very private. And they quickly followed up with another email saying, what we meant to say was, in many states, this is totally encouraged. And so they had to, great, let's go to the next action we can take to get more women into our teams and therefore increase the performance. Let's say we've hired women, we're paying them, and now what? We need to promote them in our organization so that we can start to tackle that 1 in 10 vice presidents in supply chain being women. We can get that to 50-50. Women tend to use different language than men. This presents a challenge at promotion time. So I'm going to put 2 sentences. Man said, and which one do you think a woman said? We achieved 15% cost savings or I saved 5 days from lead time. So if you think about in your mind, which one probably came from a man, which one probably came from a woman. So typically, women speak in we language and men speak in I language. This we language are shaped in society. We women are shaped in society to use this language from a very, very young age. We'll say things like we had an accomplishment, even though it was 100% just one woman who did the work. It'll still come out as a we. And I do this all the time. I know the statistic. I know this fact, and I still say it. You know, we thinking we did a good job here. What a team effort, when even if it was a totally solo project. So as we go into promotion time, we really need to look past this language flip. And it's often really hard because we'll say, well, it's unclear what that specific person accomplished on this project. They know they're saying we did this and we did this. What did this one specific person do? So you'll need to actually ask. The answer here is not that women will change their language to say I. That's not the answer. The answer is not to change what 50% of the population does to communicate. The answer is that we help put structures in place to understand what a woman did specifically on a project and what a man did specifically on a project. Men will tend to use I language even if they had a very small part in accomplishing whatever the team did. And that's not a knock on either gender. That's just how we typically speak. So it's important to ask clarifying questions so that we can promote equitably and in a fair manner. So inclusion, we're going to talk about a little bit. This is making sure women stick around. We want to promote them. We also want to make sure that they feel included. This is not always rocket science. There are some simple items we can do to help women and men feel more included on our team. So here's a few super practical tips to get started. First, stop interrupting women. Women get interrupted twice as often as men. And this is one of two options. So one, stop doing it yourself. And when you do it, because you will, just stop talking and acknowledge and say, sorry, I interrupted you, please continue. Just acknowledge it, call it out, stop talking, let the other person finish. The second one is to advocate for women by interrupting their interrupter. And what this sounds like is I'll be speaking, someone will start talking over me, and then someone in the room needs to step up for me and say, Deborah is speaking now. That's all you need to do. You don't need to apologize. You don't need to qualify. You don't just say, Deborah has some really smart ideas she's sharing. No, you just need to say, Deborah is speaking now. Call attention to it. What you could also do is start to play a little game with yourself and make little tick marks. 2 columns, one that says a man was interrupted and the other that says a woman was interrupted, and just track it and just look at the end of a meeting, how many times was who interrupted. And this will also be a good way to understand in your team generally, if you're a team of interrupters, and it would be great for just team dynamics to say, gosh, we should really let each other finish sentences. Next, women normally take notes in meetings. We usually take the notes, we track the action items, not always, but generally women do this work. I just saw another article actually that talked about unmeasurable, unpromotable work and how women take that on 90% more often than men. So a lot of the keeping the organization running, but it's not recognized as something that's an accomplishment. So you could have a man do it, or you could have a computer do it, which is also a really lovely way to lean on technology and then have men do the follow-up, for example. In the end, really, please, what you need to do is really ask your team, ask the women on their team what would help them feel more included, and so that their accomplishments can be noticed and they can get promoted. So you can help to get parity. And again, that gender parity is not because that's a good thing to do. The gender parity is to make more money, do better performance, whatever it is you're trying to do this year. The studies show over and over again that it will work. 2 final section, and we're going to switch over to the environment. So two quiz questions. This is your chance to win the leaderboard, bragging rights among SavePix members everywhere. All right, here we go. We're ready. Question 7 from the news. Which CEO recently said that globalization is dead and supply chains should reshore? CEO of Volvo or the CEO of Microsoft? who recently said this? Levi Strauss, very, very interesting interview. I encourage you can go Google this easily, and very interesting, basically saying we ignored the planet for a really long time, and it was a huge misstep on our part. So they basically saying we were greenwashing, and now we're realizing that was a huge mistake. And we're seeing a massive shift in the way that supply chains are going to be set up, and we need to figure out what to do. Tying globalization actually with carbon emissions, quite an interesting interview done with Levi Strauss. All right, this is maybe going to impact our leaderboard. Wow, yes, we do. We have a new winner. This is amazing. Okay, one last question. One last question here. Last one of the day, and then we're going to switch into a bit of a brainstorm discussion. But again, don't leave. It'll be painless. Last one, Paris Mayor Anne Hidalgo promises everything that citizens of Paris need are within how many minutes walk or cycle? 5 minutes, 15 minutes, or 25 minutes. You may have heard of this concept. A blank minute city is what it's called, kind of catching on among ESG folks around the world. And the answer here, many of you got it, a 15-minute city. This idea is that how can we have anything somebody needs, a school, a grocery store, doctor, shopping, leisure, restaurants, within 15-minute walk or cycle, which also indicates changing cities to be more walking, cycle friendly and less centered around cars. All right, so what is this going to do to our final scores? Holding my breath here. Candace, well done. Round of applause, huge win. You get confetti and just massive bragging rights that you've been reading the news. Well done. And thank you everybody for playing. All right, we're going to go into the second topic from today. So we've covered one topic about women in our teams, and that really covers the S and the G for ESG. The S piece being equity, and DEI sits inside of S. And the G piece, governance, is really about how do we know that we're doing a good job? What do our commitments look like? How do we follow up on those? Which standards do we adopt? Quality standards, ISO standards, or other commitments? G tends to be sort of overlooked in the ESG world, but I think it's really important. Now we're going to flip over to the E, so the environment. Just to keep you on your toes here, we're going to explore two problem statements around how we can help our supply chains be better for the environment. The structure we're going to use for this is the circular economy, because that's what I spend a lot of my time thinking about and running this nonprofit called the Circular Supply Chain Network. I don't know how familiar all of you are with the concept. Instead of giving you an overview of what it is, I'm going to actually have us all watch a short 90-second explainer video that my nonprofit put out last year that gives you the gist of how a circular supply chain is different from a linear supply chain. The video is going to take just a slight moment to get less grainy, and let me play it. And you should be able to, I think you should be able to get, I'm just going to reshare my screen because I'm not sure I clicked the share sound button. So now I've definitely clicked the share sound button. All right, here we go.
Our supply chains today do the opposite. They consume. What if supply chain could save the world? Our supply chains today do the opposite. They consume resources from the earth and create greenhouse gas emissions. We use over 100 billion tons of material each year, and only about 8.5% is used again. At this rate, we need nearly 2 planets to support everything we consume. We are at a point we need to stop using resources from inside the planet and use the resources we already have. What if instead of today's linear take-make-waste supply chains, we use circular supply chains? Supply chains are a series of inputs, outputs, and processes. Circular supply chains use inputs that have already been used or are renewable. Circular supply chains generate value as outputs. Today's waste streams are first reduced and then sold to other supply chains as an input to their process. So waste becomes value. Circular supply chains reduce how much they need, like making our supply chains shorter and more local. They make the most out of everything. How is this all possible? Because circular supply chains are interconnected systems like ecosystems in nature. This means we use partnership and technology to work across supply chains, that we all work together to reduce and maximize resources by getting them from each other instead of from the planet. So what if supply chains could save the world? They can.
All right, perfect. So key points here. How is a circular supply chain different than a linear supply chain? 4 main ways. First, a circular supply chain is an interconnected system. So you might be thinking, look, supply chains are already interconnected systems to a point, but we aren't always forthcoming with data. And it can be difficult to find true partnerships for all of the different materials and resources flowing through our processes, like water, steam runoff that comes off of our processes. Could that be captured and shared with another supply chain? Data is a big one here. That data continues to be a real challenge for many supply chains in data sharing with the partners they already signed contracts with. Inputs are secondary or renewable. So primary inputs are ones that come from the planet. Secondary would be used again. This is different than recycling. This is really about how do we take an item and let it remain as itself for as long as possible. The car industry has been doing this for a long time with certified pre-owned cars. We can buy a used car instead of starting from scratch every single time. We're starting to see this in electronics, right to repair laws. How do we make sure that we can actually leave a phone as a phone and just replace one part instead of starting from scratch? Renewable means that it grows in a reasonably quick manner. So we could do renewable energy, of course, but we could also look at inputs like bamboo as an input instead of wood. It's actually a grass and grows really quickly. So really cool about material science inputs that, again, that's another presentation. Today, our supply chains produce waste streams and value streams. In a circular supply chain, everything is a value stream because you find partners to take your waste. And we do this because we first reduce what is needed. And this might look like business model changes to product as a service models instead of selling. And then we want to maximize the resource use that we have. So how do we make sure that items around us are in use as much as possible? Big performance management shift is that instead of tracking something like inventory turns and wanting that to be really high, we instead want to track use. So it's a huge shift from turns and how much we sell to how much is an individual item used. So what we're going to do, sometimes I think it's easier to grasp a concept like circular supply chains through a problem that real supply chains are trying to solve. So I'm going to show you 2, and we're going to do the world's quickest little brainstorm. We can do that live, or you can type it. So you'll still have a chance to choose your preference of engagement here. These 2 questions actually are the basis of a student hackathon we hosted over Earth Day weekend about 2 weeks ago. So at the end, you'll also be able to see what students submitted. I'll give you the website for that. So the first problem to solve comes from the industrial company called Cummins. They make engines. A couple of the examples are here, which you can see. So we're going to ask, how might we create an industrial packaging solution that is reusable among partners? So we know everybody who's going to be using this packaging. We want to be able to ship around all the components for the engines, the finished engines, flow spares, anything like that. Today, the majority of packaging within the Cummins supply chain is single use, about 90% is single use. And they're trying to figure out how to turn that into multi-use. Their supply chain looks about like you would imagine a supply chain to look. And a reminder here about circular supply chain. So how might we consider this interconnected system idea within a set of known partners? We could use, again, secondary and renewable inputs. So that's how do we use a package that's been used again, a packaging solution, some sort of an outer generate value. So not generating waste streams if possible by reducing and maximizing. So in this case, we're reducing because we're not using single use material. We're actually using a reusable container, and then we're maximizing the use of that instead of the inventory turns of using a bunch of single-use packaging. We're going to use one package over and over and over again. So if you prefer, you can type out a couple of ideas and those will appear here. So this is in the same Menti app that we've been using for the pop quiz. You could type in the chat, which I will open up here. and loving to see the banter that I've missed. And or you can also come off mute if there's an idea that you want to share. One idea around how might we create an industrial packaging solution that's reusable among partners. So if you think about one process component we might want to take into account, and maybe a technology, how might we track those? What would that look like? Depending on where you are in supply chain, if you're in logistics or in warehousing and inventory, my favorite, like Jenny said, what is one way that you would need to change your process in order to support something like this? Or if you have any questions, you can also ask me. I know you didn't come today expecting to be put on the spot, but we're going to do this twice and it's going to be painless-ish, painless-ish. One brave question, I'll give you an idea, but one brave question, one idea for how might we do an industrial packaging solution to be reused? So for example, how, if we have, instead of single-use cardboard that could be lay flat, what if we have these, reusable, maybe it's plastic, but ideally made out of a plant. Good job, Jenny. Don't brand it. That's a really good starting point. Packaging can be really tough depending on what's on the outside, and it really constrains us to which countries and industries you could be on. Wooden packing crates with RFID, perfect idea here. And how this could translate is to say, look, we're going to have reusable crates. The benefit of reusable packaging is that, as this person has pointed out, we can affix some sort of a tracking device to it. So we can get even better tracking of our shipments. Sometimes we can look when something's in transit and it's where it's supposed to be, but it's not always, like the information we get from the tracking system says this should be here, but it's not actually where it is. So by having the packaging work harder for us, this is one way we can increase visibility. Any final ideas anybody wants to share? And this is a lot. It's putting you on toes. No packaging requirements for some products. Excellent. I think this is a really good one. There's some things that we put inside packaging, which is silly. We don't need to package, but we just do it because we think reducing individual packaging requirements and having bins for items, for example, that are robust and could take it. Good. Both excellent ideas. The next one, and we'll spend the similar, just 2 minutes on this. This is from a company called Forbo Flooring. And theirs is sort of the opposite idea. So if the idea from the Cummins problem is how do we get this reusable packaging that could circulate, once a month or once every 2 weeks, this is quite an opposite. So how might we create a solution so future stakeholders will know what materials inside a floor? So imagine there's an industrial flooring company, they put down industrial flooring. Let's say they've actually invested quite a bit in trying to figure out an innovative material for the floor. But that floor is going to be on the floor for 20, 30 years, 15, 10, 15, something long time. This is what we call a guaranteed loss of custody. This is not within our ecosystem. This does not stay within our partners. The building could be sold 5, 6, 12 times. Our company might not even exist 15 or 20 years from now. How do we actually figure out a way so that whoever takes up that floor will know what's inside of it? So is it recyclable? Is it renewable? What should I do with this floor as I pick it up? The construction industry is very interesting. It's super, super dirty. A lot of waste and producing a lot of emissions. So if any component, any part could be harvested and used again, would be a good win overall. So this one's a really tricky one. But again, I'll put up the option to list an idea, or if you want to drop it in the chat. This one's a fun one to think about. How might we add an identifier to flooring? Where would that go? How might we let the building owner know to look for some kind of an identifier? And then where do we store the information? QR codes is excellent. That's a good idea. That could be on top of or underneath the floor. So on top of could be done with a bit of an invisible ink. Many of the students submitted ideas to put the code underneath. So like between the floor and the subflooring. Brand instructions on the back of the flooring, exactly. So somehow having this layer in between the two floors, which is perfect. We also talked about the role of industry standard groups for keeping the information about the floor someplace that's not proprietary. So once they do get this QR code, they need to punch it in and that needs to go to someplace. But if we assume maybe this company is not even going to be around in 15 years or nobody's going to look for anything for 40 years, how will this information have staying power? Where does it live? And who's going to pay to host that information? All right, I will release you from the brainstorming activity. We had 11 teams competing. Each video is only 4 minutes, and so you can see what they each thought about. You can scan the QR code or you can go to the quick link there, cscn.link/ideas, and you'll see all the different submissions. We're in the middle of final rounds of judging. There's one of the problems that's very, very close. So we're going back and really pushing on it. We'll announce those soon. All right, with that, Jenny, would love for you to help lead Q&A if anybody has questions for me about what we covered, about what we didn't. And again, thank you for participating, though I doubt you were warned that this would be quite so participative today, but I appreciate your willingness to play along.
Brilliant, thank you. I think these we've got so much better at these online quiz and things. They just make everything so interactive. They're really cool. I remember the first ones that you did with the supply chain rebels. You introduced me to the whole breakout room concept and everything, and here we are 2 years later, and we've got getting better and better. So who's got a question? I mean, I can see at the top of my screen Zanola and Mungo, and it's not like either of them to be quiet. So I'm quite sure that there's some sort of comment or question that they might have, but anybody else who's got anything, don't be shy. We're a small enough group. I think that we can just kind of leap in and come off mic and say something, apart from thank you very much, Deborah, but we'll do that later.
Thank you very much, Deborah. But my question is not really related to what you were talking about. It just suddenly occurred to me, have you had a look at Green Score at all or not?
I've heard of it. I've not looked into it. So unfortunately, I won't have a good opinion for you. Do you have a specific question on it? And then I can always follow back up with you.
I've been looking at it and I'm just trying to find somebody who's been trying to use it or who's prepared to take the time to understand it in more detail.
Good. Give me a bit and I'll come back to you with a couple of examples or look into the network.
Okay.
But I'll ask a question. Oh, sorry, Mungo, go ahead.
And I was also going to say just something interesting about Chip Berg of Levi. I'm not sure. I actually didn't know he'd said that, but I do know that Levi's are making their clothes to last longer. That's kind of their strategy. So wear it for longer is kind of a tagline of theirs, which is quite interesting.
Yeah, it's an amazing trend of realizing that actually people do want their items to last longer. Even though we seem to have drifted away from that these last couple of years. So I'll see if I can pull this Levi globalization.
It's also the realization of what goes into the whole manufacturing of things like jeans and the whole, what's that trendy thing that they look like they're years old and they're frayed and all of that. I mean, that's just devastating to the environment. Lesotho, I know, has really struggled with the whole textile industry and what it's doing to the rivers. So yeah, I mean, Levi's, I can't imagine that they would last longer. I know people who've had their Levi jeans for like 30 years.
Exactly.
Right, so Zanola, you were going to go.
Oh yeah, so thanks, Deborah. That was really interesting. I think I wanted to check because I think there's a lot out there on ESG. It's kind of the buzzword of the moment. But there's not a lot of transparency in supply chains or in companies. Everyone's got their net zero this and carbon neutral that, but it's difficult to know kind of who means what they're saying and are they delivering against the goals, and then are the goals comparable? So is the baseline and then if you're looking at 2020 or you're looking at 1990 or whatever, you could be looking like you're making amazing progress, but and then the scope of it. So just wondering how do we understand that, or where are we able to get a good grip on kind of what's good ESG, I don't know, transparency or reporting or something like that, so that we can understand what the companies are doing out there.
Yeah, really good question, and a tough one. None of our supply chains were built to optimize for ESG transparency. They were built for time, cost, and maybe quality, depending on the brand. And so we have ended up with this land of outsourced, and it's really hard to figure out who's actually operating in our supply chain. Really hard. We didn't set up any of our contracts to demand transparency. We did not build for this. And it's not necessarily anyone's fault. Perhaps we should have done better, but it wasn't our remit. We've normally been in the time, cost, quality game. And now it seems like fairly rapidly, as the world realizes how much supply chain controls the decisions that we make, and that we're everywhere and we're doing everything. Now all of a sudden we're saying, gosh, the majority of an organization's carbon, 95% is produced by the supply chain. Okay, cool. But that actually means it's everybody else upstream who we buy from, but we don't have any requirements around carbon or around labor rights or around any of the ESG items that we need to go and track. So the tough part is we now need to sort of pivot and attack this problem together. The world of ESG is so massive that I recommend starting with one element in one of the categories of ESG, and then find your friendliest supplier and go at it together. So don't ask for data to be punitive or to be reducing cost, but to say, look, we're both trying to achieve the same goal, and maybe it's about carbon. Let's at least try to figure out what is happening through our supply chains, and at least try to kind of come up with a number of like, how much carbon are we doing today that's based on our own supply chain and not based off of estimates, which is how many supply chains do their carbon reporting today. So I think it's a huge one. I think the more supply chain professionals to start talking about ESG and talking about it with each other, rather than sustainability professionals, love them, but they don't know our field. And so it's important for us to kind of bring ourselves to the table so that we can best represent the processes and the complexity that we're all managing today.
Brilliant. Thank you. And Bahabu, you've got your hand up. Do you want to unmute yourself and ask Deborah something?
Maybe also just a comment. I'm actually in the job market, so the conversation around women and disparities does really, feel a bit personal, because when you apply for a job, yes, you kind of feel like I probably don't fit all the minimum requirements. And I think the problem is with most of the companies, they don't even give you feedback of where you fall short. So I guess that's kind of the reason why you don't even apply for certain roles, even if, well, I do try to apply, but I'm finding that as one of the reasons why women would not even go there, because of the feedback process that you even try to reach HR and ask, and it's just a generic feedback. And then also on the negotiation part, I find that especially in South Africa, we are struck with a lot of unemployment at the moment. So I don't know if I can say maybe companies are using that to their advantage, but you don't even have kind of a room to negotiate, because there's a lot of people that are already in the market that will take the job for a lower price.
Right.
That's a good point. Take it or leave it.
Two thoughts on that for you. One, many times the first thing to read your resume is a computer, not a person. And so a lot of companies are using computer screeners. So as you're trying to get for feedback, it's not going to go to a person. There's a couple of softwares that you can do free trials on that will compare your resume to the job description, and it'll look for keyword matches. And you want to try to drive that up to at least 75, 80% match, So the way you're describing supply chain might be using slightly different language than the way the job description is describing supply chain. And if a human was reading your resume, they would probably make that translation, but a computer doesn't know how to do that. So see if you can get one of those free trials to compare your resume with the job description to see if you can tweak and update the keywords on your resume to match. That's one. Two, if you negotiate your salary that they've given you an offer, it's very unlikely that their response is going to be to withdraw your offer because they're mad that you negotiated. So, you know, I would try once. And if they say, oh gosh, no, there's no room for that, then try something else. Ask for an extra 2 vacation days. Ask for something that's non-monetary that at least will help to value your time. But very, very unlikely that if you ask respectfully for a little bit more money in the offer, they're not going to say like, oh, you know, we really don't have room for a negotiator on our team. So it's very low stakes if you push back just once, just try. And if they say there's no more money, try something else. Try a non-monetary benefit that you might be able to work from home Friday, something like that you could fit into your negotiation as well. But men are negotiating almost without a doubt. So you should too.
Great advice. Nothing ventured, nothing gained. Sylvia just asked, and we'll do this very quickly because you've got the rest of your day to get to. Are any of you using SEDEX or CEDEX? I obviously am not because I don't know what it is. I don't see any hands up.
No.
Or thumbs up. So Sylvia, Deborah, do you know what it is?
I don't.
Okay, well, we've all got to research what it is then, unless Sylvia wants to just show her face and give us a 1-second description of it.
Hi everyone, sorry. It's a tool that you can use. You can register. There are a number of companies who are registered, and then you basically track a company's sustainability score. And so you can see how ethical their business is. So as a retailer, we are looking at our international suppliers and trying to get them all to sign up and to fill in the criteria so that we can actually understand their sustainability scores.
Brilliant. Well, thank you very much for that. I think we're all going to be looking that up. So great. Thank you all very, very much for being interactive, being prepared to ask questions. I know it's been a small group, but I actually like the small groups because it's so much less, not intimidating, but we can get more out of everybody and hopefully you can all take stuff away. So Deborah, as always, thank you so much from me personally, but from SAPIX and from all the members that are here today. You always manage to introduce something new every single time. So thank you. And we look forward to the next time. And it won't be 7 o'clock in the morning. We'll try harder.
I'll be in a different time zone.
Okay, we'll
solve it.
And to all the rest of you, if you haven't registered for the conference, please register for the conference. Please come and join us 12th to the 15th of June. There will be jet fuel by then. We won't have to walk. And anyway, we can always we can listen to Zanola's presentation anywhere in the world because she's going to be beaming in virtually. So it's going to be great. We are going to be in person. I know we are, apart from Zanola. We'll wave to you from a distance, but sometime soon. And Deborah, come back soon.
I will. Thank you very much.
Take care, everybody. Thank you very much for being here this afternoon, and we'll see you at the next one.
Good. Thank you.
Thank
Bye,
you.
everyone.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.